Okay, I'm going to be talking a little bit about some people just don't understand, or they still buy into the lie of global warming caused by man. Now, they've changed it through the years. The very first Earth Day was in April of 1970, and I actually remember it. I was in Mrs. Neal's class at Glen Oaks Elementary. And back then, the worry was we were going to go through a mini ice age and everybody was going to freeze to death. So somewhere in the 80s, it changed to worrying about chlorofluorocarbons tearing up the ozone layer, and they were all going to be burned by UV light rays. Well, then that kind of went away in the 1990s because it was realized that sunlight actually creates ozone when it strikes it. So when it strikes oxygen in the atmosphere. So the ozone layer goes up and down depending on the season, and the sun actually replenishes the ozone layer. So then they decided to change it into, okay, we're all going to burn up global warming, and they fudge a lot of the information on it, and then they just called it climate change. Well, it's man-made climate change because the global warming thing wasn't, obviously the oceans weren't rising. And Al Gore said on ABC News in the year 1999 that New York was going to be under 9 feet of water by this time in 2017. And it's actually 2018 where I'm shooting this early. But I want to go over some stuff that I don't know if I realize the last 20 or 30 years most students have been taught Common Core, which are government releases from the NEA and the Department of Education, which is just the biggest bunch of leftist evolutionists in the world. But anyway, here's a little something you may not know. And I've asked this to a whole lot of people, probably 600, and only one person's got it almost right. You'd have to have actually studied it to get it exactly right. But the Earth only receives 1,000th of 1% of the total solar output of the sun. Yes, 1,000th of 1%. Now, there's a thing called the inverse square law. The further away you get, it's at an inverse square, how much less you get of electromagnetic radiation. Now, I've already marked this off to show you the distance from the Earth to the sun and the apparent size. So, the start of the marker is going to be the Jolly Fat Man Santa Claus here. The Earth is going to be not the base of this pin, but halfway between the base and the tip. That's the apparent size of the Earth. And there's my pincher, Mr. Spock there. He's, I guess he's going to be in the way here. But anyway, so from right here, Santa Claus would be the Earth's orbit. And the sun is going to be right there. Remember, it takes 8 light minutes to get from the Earth to the sun. So let's walk this off. Now, that's actually a soccer ball from Dave & Buster's. So let's start walking it off. And remember, it's about 95 Earth diameters to the sun. These are all NASA numbers I'm using since everybody loves NASA. And you can fit approximately 109 Earths across the face of the sun. Okay, so there's the sun, and there's some monster eating the sun. So let's go back. So that's how far it is from the Earth to the sun. And we receive 1/1000th of 1% of the total energy output of the sun. Now, that's the energy that comes into the Earth. The other thing that causes, that mitigates and causes solar output to be regulated is albedo from volcanism. And there's the big heat sink. The biggest heat sink on the Earth is where you get El Nino from. El Nino means the child, And it was initially, you know, we say we have an El Nino weather pattern. Well, the name El Nino came from people in South America, because in their December they got it down there because of the reverse seasons. And the world's largest water mass is the South Pacific, and so that's the biggest heat exchange rate. That's also the place on Earth that has probably the most active volcanism right now, and the ash goes up into the air, and it reflects some of the sunlight. So I've been studying this for quite a while, and we've gone through several Maunder minimums, a Dalton minimum, a Maunder minimum. The mini ice age was 1645 to 1715, and it just froze the hell out of Europe. There was also a mini ice age in the Middle Ages caused by Krakatoa and Krakatoa. Well, I'm not spelling it right. Well, anyway, and when that would happen, all the tree rings, which is dendrochronology, around the world had several minimum years around in the mid 500s, and those caused at the time the eastern leg of the Roman Empire was still in power, and they were starting to reclaim land. Well, they were hit with plagues because of the increased cold, and it actually caused the rise of Islam. Islam was kind of came along about 100 years later, and the Eastern Roman Empire would basically reduce down to just Constantinople, Byzantium, just that area. Instead of reclaiming the old Roman Empire, it pretty much just stayed upon itself, and it allowed the rise of Islam. So let's go over some of the basics here. So the Arctic sea ice in late winter is 14 to 16 million square kilometers. It doesn't really change that much. If you're getting some number, I'm telling you, it's not the right number. The Antarctic ocean ice, which is separate from the ice on the continent, is 17 to 20 million square kilometers. The Arctic permanently has an area 3 to 4 meters thick of ice right in the center, and it's about the size of Vermont and New Hampshire, and that one never goes away. You can go on to YouTube and watch the first nuclear-powered submarine, the Nautilus, breaking through the ice at the North Pole, and how it's 3 feet thick, and they did it in the middle of summer. And then you can watch the and that was, you know, several decades ago. And some other things I want you to kind of check out there. And here's my website, timbosplace.com, and if you would subscribe. So an an astronomical unit is 93 million miles, and that's the different distance between Santa here and that ball out there where there's the sparks kind of going out to. And so the folly that man's doing this, when you're only receiving 1,000th to 1% of your energy from the sun, and the sun goes through these 11-year cycles, that's accepted. It's an 11-year cycle. There's a guy, if you want to check out his website, not by fire but by ice. There's a lot of predictions that we're going to have some slow solar output cycles. Well, there was a period this summer where there were no sunspots for 2 weeks. Kind of weird. But there's also mysteries down in Antarctica that I want to make you aware of, give you a little homework assignment. So it started with Operation Paperclip, which was the rat line, which brought over all the Nazi scientists. Then there was a thing called Operation High Jump. And you can go on YouTube, and Admiral Byrd says he's going to lead an expedition to the South Pole, but he doesn't say anything about it. Later on, his last real public appearance, he goes onto this show called Xenoscope and talks about everything that they found down in Antarctica. Well, all of a sudden, he got shut up after that. Never really heard from him again. He was basically the world's, or America's greatest explorer. He would be like the Indiana Jones of explorers. Then there was a thing called Operation Fishbowl. And the Soviets and Americans both threw nuclear bombs at the Van Allen radiation belt in hopes of blowing holes in it so they could go to the moon or outer space. And you can actually see Operation Fishbowl on YouTube, and they talk about pretty much everything about it. By the way, that's where they learned about EMPs, because when they're trying to blow holes into it, it was in the South Pacific, and it fried all the it fried a bunch of the transistors that were in Hawaii. And then right after that, there was the International Geophysical Year, 1958, the UN Charta, and NASA was formed, and Antarctica was put off limits. So if you go punch in, I'm going to bring up the image for you, but just so you know that I didn't make it up. Antarctic Conference. Punch in Antarctic Treaty Conference and do the search images, and you're going to see this weird thing. And you just can't go to Antarctica unless you get permission that's guarded by the navies of the world. So whatever in the world, have you ever seen a conference table that looks like this in your whole life? Conference tables are always either square, the main guys are sitting on a elevated thing, they're round. But where do you see that? You see this shape all the time on the back of your dollar bill. So it's the world order impressing upon everybody that nobody goes to Antarctica without permission. Anyway, check out more about that on timbosplace.com and subscribe if you like it. Thank you. Out.